I'm going to show you how to optimally rehydrate and refuel for a fighter who has a same day fight and same day weigh-in within a few hours of each other. This is a real client case study, athlete case study of one of my boxers. I'm going to walk you through step by step. So this is exactly what I'm going to be implementing with him for his amateur boxing bout. So let's just go through some basics. He has a 9:10 weigh-in and an 11 a.m. fight. So there's a small window to refuel. How are we going to manage this? Well, one, we need to establish, prior context. What does he eat and what can he tolerate? So I first figured out what he typically eats before sparring. Now you're going to see a higher fat meal here, which it's low to moderate fat, I should say here. But typically we wouldn't advise a moderate or higher fat meal pre-fight or pre-sparring. But I need to establish a baseline first to see what his gut tolerability is, because a mistake that a lot of coaches make is they put in new things and they keep fat too high. So I needed to establish where his tolerability limit was so I knew what to play with, because you don't want to bring in new foods when you have a fight coming in, because you just don't know, or even foods that you haven't tried in a little while because you don't know how your gut's going to tolerate it. So I established prior context. Then here are two options I'm going to run with him. So as soon as he finishes his weigh-in, and this is not an aggressive cut for him at all. His range fluctuates between 65 to 67 kilos. So we really are not really pushing the needle very much, but nevertheless, we still want to be mindful about our reintroduction of food here. Now, the top limit here, like he was consuming about 800 calories, which is a decent amount, 90 minutes, 2 hours before sparring. It's a fine amount. So I know that's going to be my limiter. I'm not going to exceed 800 calories, but you have to consider that a fighter is going to have a moderate degree of anxiety at minimum, or even a high degree of anxiety. Now, I know this athlete, even though it's his first amateur bout, I can sense that he's not very stressed about this process. He has what I perceive to be in a normal bandwidth of performance anxiety to stimulate enough arousal. But I'm not anticipating hyper arousal. Therefore, that's going to inform how much food I give him, because a hyper aroused, anxious athlete is not going to be able to tolerate much food, if at all. And so, considering that, here's what I've built out for him. Two options. One, you want to keep it low volume. You want to keep it low volume so you can not have the athlete feel heavy and they still feel lighter on their feet. That makes a difference to the quality, the performance of the athlete and their perception coming in. So they're just keeping their mind and their pre-prep fight feeling at a good equilibrium. Option one, as soon as he finishes the weigh-in, we have about 80 to 100 minutes to refuel before the fight. So I'm keeping this meal around 500 calories. We got 40 grams of protein. We got only 1 gram of fat and 99 grams of carbs. And if you really like the look of this tracker, by the way, you can buy it. Just let me know. The protein is from a powder, and the fruits are a combination of fructose and glucose, because we know that the human body can only digest the combination of glucose and fructose at about 120 grams per hour. Now, in Zion, if you go to your pre-weigh-in guidelines and protocol that I've built here, we know, as I point out here, that glucose can only be moved in the blood at a rate of around 90 grams per hour. But we also have to consider fructose as well, which gives us about another 30 grams. This has some variance if the athlete is bigger and beyond the average size of a human. So this can change. But considering based off the transporter capacity of GLUT5 and SGLT1, it gives us a range of how much we choose to refuel an athlete with. Now, obviously, people consume hundreds of grams of more of carbs in a single sitting, but we're talking about what can be moved into the blood, be made available to use for immediate acute physical activity via serum. So if we go back to the tracker here, then we can see that we're staying within these ranges here. So this is option one. And option two is instead of things like oats, people often refuel with oats, and it can really make the athlete feel quite heavy. Instead, cream of rice can be quite a lot lighter. Now, the feasibility of a cream of rice and a variety of fruits and honey and protein is different. So I'm just the feasibility of doing this at a fight because he's going to weigh in and he's not going to have access necessarily to his normal living environment because he's on the go because he only has 100 so minutes. But he can prep this if he wants. So I have two different options for him. We're not going to be adding eggs. We're not going to be adding sourdough. It's the constraint of it is too high. But these are our two low volume options that both mirror basically very similar calories that give him enough time. Now, how much time is enough? Well, you need to study gut transit time to understand this. So if we go to our research on the gut, then we can see that the transit time and the gut motility of food in a fasted state is much shorter than in a fed state. So he's going to be in a fasted state. So we're going to have around 0 to 2 hours here in the top left corner before the food from the mouth is digested. Well, digestion is all the way through the whole process through defecation. So digestion, we're talking about just in the stomach here, the 0 to 2 hours, then getting passed through the duodenum, in the jejunum, then into the small intestine. We want to ideally get to the latter end of this process. Because even athletes vomiting, you generally can't vomit things up from the small intestine. I have never even seen that to be even possible. So we want it to be outside of the stomach. Why I talk about vomiting is because anxiety can bring this on, and guess what? A very hard liver punch or a punch to the diaphragm can make people sick. So considering like these little nuances, we have around this time, we just have enough time to have confidence that this is going to be digested properly or out of the gut, out of the stomach. But with anxiety, with cortisol being higher, it can divert blood flow away from the gastrointestinal tract, which can slow down gut motility. So considering this is one reason I kept the meal relatively lower on the calorie side, but higher on the carbohydrate side to refuel him in an appropriate way. And then obviously this is confounded if the athlete has gut gastrointestinal issues, SIBO, low bile production, which can then slow it down. But again, this is why one reason we keep fat on the lower end. So if they're coming into a fed state, this can slow it down as well. So considering if you have a 24-hour post weigh-in and you have to refeed, consider these numbers. And these are just some numbers on the athlete's weight range. You can see what they hover between. And so right now we are bang on weight. He weighed in this morning 65 kilos, and that is his weight class. And so there's not really a concern here. We didn't have any particular cut or protocol here to even get him down. It was auto-regulated by the athlete. He did a good job at it. Now tomorrow he will weigh in, and this is good because he has low anxiety coming in. We're really calm and grounded and relaxed about this. But he is eating out tonight. He is eating out tonight for a birthday. Now, this would typically not be advisable. So what do you do if you're a fighter and you want to go out the day of? Well, typically I wouldn't recommend it because it just adds in an unnecessary confounding variable. However, you can actually manage it really well if you pick appropriately. Why I say I wouldn't typically recommend it is because athletes don't typically know what to pick. That doesn't wreck the nutrition and undermine the weigh-in the next day. But going out, socializing, family, friends, laughing, amazing, perfect. Drops cortisol down, gets very parasympathetic. It's exactly what you want an athlete to do because excess cortisol production can trigger aldosterone production that can then pull sodium, triggers the kidneys to pull sodium in. And when you pull sodium in, you pull water in with it. And why biologically, evolutionarily, we believe this might happen is because a human being that is stressed needs to retain water. Because typically a human being that is stressed is one that is risk of predation, one that is at risk of their survival. And often that is accompanied by a caloric insufficiency, so not enough energy, not enough food scarcity. There's typically water scarcity as well. This combination over millions of years of evolution has led to our kidneys doing a very smart thing, and that's to retain water. Very smart. But in a stressed state, and this is why people could hold on to fluid, and when they're in a deficit and they're stressed, and they're like, why isn't the scale moving? Yeah, it's because of your kidneys. It's because of your stress. It's because of hormones that are trying to hold on to water to keep you alive. You can't think of it through the lens of I'm doing a deficit to look leaner. You have to look at it through the lens of biology and of particularly evolutionary biology. So given that, it's actually great that he's going out. What I recommended is simply don't try any new foods. Keep your meal as specific and reliable as possible to what you've previously been doing. And a simple recommendation: have a lean cut of steak, and then a portion. What's a portion? It would be typically based off the athlete's weight, but you could have somewhere between around 4 to 6 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. So this would maybe be around 100 to 150 grams of carbs. Keeping the fats are okay here, low to moderate though. And this is where athletes will mess up, is the sodium. When you go to a restaurant, they typically have a lot of oils and salt because they make the food taste good, but you don't know how much salt is being added. And as a result, you can easily blow out, particularly if you're having desserts and things like that, easily blow out and have your weight jump up by multiple kilos or at least a kilo, and that can then freak the athlete out the next day. So that's why I recommend something as simple as a steak, some potatoes. I wouldn't recommend like baked potatoes, not fried potatoes, because again, you don't know what's going on with the oil, you don't know what's going on with the extra added salt. So just to minimize that, particularly when we're very close to this weigh-in, and it's not like this athlete has 24 hours to rehydrate. They have 100 minutes, 120 minutes. So we don't want to go too past the mark here. I'm treating this athlete, Mauricio, as a professional athlete, and like I would someone who was taking this with the utmost seriousness. So that's why I speak in this way. Now, what about rehydration with his food? So now we've got the food. We got to talk about what happens after that, and that's the rehydration. So how you want to rehydrate is the literature points to rehydrating about 125% of what was lost. So what that looks like in numbers is if you lose like 10 kilos, actually, let me show you a real example. All right, real example. So I had to do a very aggressive weight cut with one of my athletes. He's a strongman athlete. And if Jonah cut 4.3 kilos, 5% of body weight, he needs to replace 125% of what was lost. You just multiply the amount of what was lost by 0.25, and then you get your number. And so he needed to do equals 1 liter plus 4.3 liters equals 5.3. Don't consume more than 1 liter per hour if you're coming from particularly an aggressive deficit, an aggressive refueling, an aggressive kind of bottomed out deprivation. Now, for this athlete, he's walking around where it sits between 63 to 67. And so he, technically speaking, he may have lost, a kilo? And so that would just be 1.25 liters. Why we do 125% is because when you lose weight and when you are depleting yourself of body water, particularly if there's heat stress involved, there typically seems to be a latent effect, one of the thermoregulation that's needed to keep your body. So if you do a heat loss, if you do heat strategies to lose weight, you will continue to sweat. And so one reason why we say 125% is so that you can make sure that you are also replenishing the fluids that you're losing in the time after weigh-in and the fight itself, that your body temperature is regulating itself. So that's one reason why we do that. And then we also encounter and compensate for urine losses as well. So let's go back to what we're doing here. So we're not just doing water. Water is not sufficient for rehydration. You can see that I've put in, actually I didn't talk about the beetroot. I'll talk about the beetroot juice in a second for nitrates. But for coconut water, we have a half a liter, which will get about 400 milligrams of potassium, and we'll have half a gram to 1 gram of sodium. Typically from a Celtic sea salt is my preferred, something that's higher mineral and lower microplastic toxicity profile, but that's a nuance that people will argue about. But that's where I tend to fall on. We're rehydrating with a mineral combination. You could take an electrolyte blend, but most are absolutely, I was going to say abhorrent, but that's such a strong word, such a fancy word. They're just inadequate. They're kind of shit for rehydration, particularly the potassium side. They're basically glorified, low calorie, 0 calorie, sugary tasting sweet drinks that have a bit of sodium in it that you're paying a lot of money for. So typically I like to make my own. How we make our own? Coconut water, 50-50 split. No more than 1 liter per hour, like I said, but I'm not really that concerned about it. But he shouldn't have a desire to drink more than a liter. But you also don't want to weigh the athlete down as well. I don't need you to drink more than a liter. So just have it available to you though. Have at least a liter available to you. Just the rehydration pre. You can also apply this post as well. Post-fight is fine. And the weight he will lose post-fight, he can also apply the 125% rehydration. Now, I'm also adding in beetroot. Not the physical beetroot, but beetroot juice. Now, I don't know whether this athlete can get beetroot juice in time. Beetroot juice, because beetroots are rich in nitrates. Nitrates help with vasodilation and your capillaries to vasodilate. And it's been shown in multiple studies, I believe. No, not I believe. I know multiple studies for improving performance outcomes. Let me show you. So we go here to Zion, and we can see down here. Oh, hydrogenates interestingly. Okay, right here. So we can see a nice infograph, dietary supplementation. So what it does is it reduces the oxygen cost of sub-maximal exercise and can, in some circumstances, enhance tolerance and exercise tolerance performance. We see it helps within shorter bouts of activity in the 5 to 30 minute range, so more acute bouts. And the protocol would be, so you typically do a loading phase. Now, typically you could have up to 15 days, you would be increasing your nitrate levels, sitting quite a high amount, at least at full to the brim, you'll have 400 mils at the top of a cup. So like at least a cup of beetroot juice, which would be my preferred suggestion because it's so easy to consume. If you can't consume beetroot juice, then you consume beetroots from the actual can itself. So what's happening here is we're rehydrating. We're getting beetroots are high in potassium. They have nitrates in them, which are going to help performance as an ergogenic aid. They're also going to have carbohydrates in them, which is going to help refuel the athlete. So we get this beautiful 3-for-1 effect. So my suggestion would be go get some beetroot juice from a local health food store or supermarket or get it delivered. And you're going to have that in the 2 to 3 hours before the bout. Now, the maximum we can do here is about 2 hours, but that's good because the research shows that about 1 to 3 hours-ish before exercise is kind of that sweet spot. So beetroots are going to be 3-for-1 there. In regards to what he's eating, last thing is what is he eating in between this time? Because most people would have just stopped here. No, I'm not going to stop here. It's not that we're concerned. Well, is it? No, we are. What I'm saying is that we want to make sure the glycogen stores are topped up and full or close to full. But not only that, but the serum, there is more available in his blood, which is acutely dependent on acute consumption. Acutely dependent on acute consumption. That sentence does not make sense, mate. Why do I put a British accent? Let me tell you, in South Africa, I do many accents. It's been a very serious video so far. It's about time I did something stupid. Anyway, it's important acutely to raise serum glucose levels with something that is very easily digestible. What are we doing here? Pomegranate juice, beautiful. High potassium, high combination fructose glucose. So that works well and has great GI tolerability, including carbs. What is the carbs I'm adding here? Candy. I want him to consume a handful of candy. Doesn't matter what it's from, really. Something you've consumed before, something you like. Could be, or as Australians say, lollies. Can you go get some lollies from the supermarket, Jane? Word is lame. I don't say lollies. What are you, 7 years old? Candy. That's a sophisticated word. So just get some candy. It's going to be, why do we do this? Because it has high water content, so it's going to be digested easily. It's got zero fat. It's low volume. It's great GI tolerability. We're raising blood glucose levels so the athlete can perform better. It's just all, this is all for, at the end of the day, it's all for optimizing performance. Now, when to consume this, I suggest 10:20 to 10:40 a.m., which is going to be around 20 to 40 minutes before the bout. Now, I leave it kind of up to the athletes, like, okay, when it feels right to you to eat again, because I can make the suggestion, but the athlete might be doing something, it may not be feasible, they might not feel ready yet. So it's important to allow the athlete to auto-regulate within their own means about when they feel is ready for them. So they can top up their glucose stores, so they can just have everything available to them for a very, for what will be either a very easy, not either easy or hard fight, but what will be a hard fought fight, I should say, a high effort fight that will require your resources, aka glucose. Important to note is that you have to get away from your dogma around functional health and around things being optimal for, you know, tooth decay, for your dogma around avoiding candy because it's processed, or whatever other bias or a dogmatic view that you may hold or someone may hold. This is not the time for it because we have other priorities right now. You have to be flexible and adaptable to your own, you know, your own beliefs around health, and know when it's the right time to push and pull on certain hyperpalatable processed foods, which can have a great utility in certain circumstances. And this is one of them. And so this covers what you need pre-fight, Mauricio. Execute that, and the gods will be even more on your side. If you're watching this and you want help and support as an athlete with your pre-fight or fighting competitive routine with training and nutrition, feel free to reach out.